It is 2024 and it is remarkably easy to play Game Boy games on anything. You could play it on your phone, you could play it on your failing laptop, you could buy an emulation device for what, 60 bucks? And Game Boy games would be the minimum of what you can play. Or if you want to play on original hardware, you can get a flash card and play ROMs. So why are we still buying physical cartridges? I'm your cool Uncle Marissa, and I don't know, I just think they're neat. But here's the thing, they're really expensive, and there are some cartridges that are just out of reach, and others where it's just hard to justify paying 40 bucks when you could get a Mii U Mini Plus for $50. It's also a market that's heavily scalped, and there's also a lot of ignorance when it comes to people thinking they found a brick of gold when it's just a Game Boy Color with a screen burn. And I'm sure many of you have seen that the prices of Game Boy games in Japan are significantly cheaper. And I don't even mean going to Japan, I mean like going to Book Off. They have Japanese games at, for example, the Book Off in Japan Village. They're so much cheaper. They're still pricier than buying them in Japan, but compared to their North American counterparts, they're so much cheaper. So you're just sitting there thinking, what if I just learned Japanese? That would just make this hobby so much cheaper. But you're not gonna do that, are you? So I'm making this video to help you out a little, and we're gonna talk about more than 10 Game Boy and Game Boy Color games that you can play on a physical cart on the cheap. Because they are Japanese, but they don't require any knowledge of Japanese to play. And a couple of them are actually in English. So let's go ahead and see what these games are. So first off, we have Tetris DX. If you don't know what Tetris is, I have a lot of questions for you. This is probably not super surprising or particularly exciting on this list, but something that is interesting about this game is that even if you have the Japan version, it is going to be in English. That's pretty neat, right? Now the cart I have is a USA version, but they are essentially identical from as far as I know. Now the DX in Tetris DX, of course, means that it plays in black and white on original Game Boys and in color on Game Boy Color. Personally, this isn't my favorite Tetris of all the many iterations of Tetris that exist. I am too used to things like hold and pressing up for pulling a block down immediately. Also, it doesn't have that classic It's not the best, but you know, it's good to have. It's Tetris. Also, while it's not particularly expensive in the US used market, it definitely is cheaper in the Japanese market, but it's not something that I would go out of my way to buy, especially individually, because once you've paid shipping and everything, then you're probably going to have paid more. But if you are putting in a bulk order or something, it's not a bad one to throw in. Next up, we have Kirby's Dreamland. Both 1 and 2 are games that you can play in Japanese versions and be totally fine because there's very little text in Kirby's Dreamland and nothing is super crucial. There are some visual environmental differences between the US version and the Japanese version. You can definitely watch a region break video from Shisa's. I will put a link in the description on what those differences are. So if that's something that is going to sway your decision, you know, might be worth checking out. But otherwise, it's Kirby, designed to be simple, designed to be for all ages, and therefore absolutely transcends any sort of language barrier. By the way, another Game Boy game that is in English, even if you get the Japanese version, which I do not own, so I can't show you, is Metroid II. So that might be one to add to the collection as well. All right, now we have Super Mario Land 2, but this goes for the first one as well. You do not need any language to play these. Everything is very standard Mario fare. There's no, you know, deep story to follow along with. It's just regular platformer Mario, but brought down several notches easier. I've actually never played through this one, but you know, everything looks familiar off the bat. All of the symbols at the bottom, you know, it's easy to interpret because there's no language, and it's something we're all familiar with. And these are very fun, and I would definitely recommend picking these up. They are also not super expensive on the US market, but I feel like a lot of people will price them poorly because they see Mario and they think that they are sitting on gold, which is not true. On to Game Boy Color. Our first game is Pokemon Pinball. I have the US version on this. The Japanese version is essentially identical. The main menu is going to be in Japanese, but all of the text in game about your various achievements during that game that pops up at the end, as well as the rolling text at the bottom during the game, are going to be in English. This is one that I would recommend getting the Japanese version just because the cartridge is way cuter. I mean, it's yellow, first of all. It's just a lot more delightful to look at than the dull gray-black US version. But insofar as Pokemon Pinball goes, this one is kind of hard for me to play because the flashing white screen between the top and the bottom is quite a headache-inducing. Alright, now on to Wario Land 2. The Wario Land games in general are pretty negligible in terms of how much text they have. And so here we have Wario Land 2, and the storytelling is very visual, and the gameplay is very straightforward. You don't even have had to have played a Wario game to know. So I would say that this one, definitely recommend. Wario Land games are some of the most fun I've had on Game Boy platformers, Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance. So I definitely recommend picking this one up. Now we have Kirby Tilt and Tumble. If you've ever played Super Monkey Ball, you have an idea what this is about. This one uses motion controls, however, and you just have to make sure Kirby does not fall off the platform. You can see from the get-go the guidance on how to hold the Game Boy is straightforward. We can't really read the backstory because it's in Japanese and the menus are in Japanese. But I feel like, you know, maybe you could Google the backstory if it's super important to you. But insofar as gameplay itself, it does not take any knowledge of Japanese. Another one of my favorite arcade-style games is Bomberman, and here we have Bomberman Max. There's two. There's a blue champion and a red one. This one's a little bit mixed. It has a long, like, intro backstory animation, and just, it has a lot of text in general, and so you feel, or at least I felt like I was missing out on something. But once it comes down to the actual gameplay, it's fairly standard fare Bomberman. The levels are pretty fun. You're just going on this journey to save these little critters. So this is something that I think, you know, you could absorb more using Google Lens to translate, or just watching a playthrough of an English version of it just to see what are they talking about in the beginning. But again, in terms of gameplay, absolutely not a problem. Now on to Wario Land 3. I know I said all the Wario games, but Wario Land 3 is a special one because while I do have the US one in my hand right now, Wario Land 3 Japanese version, you can actually switch the language to English. So it's not in English or in Japanese. You're just able to swap it. So I think that's super neat and something that is kind of ahead of its time, because now we have a lot of games where we find it fairly standard to be able to change the language. Sometimes I'll buy Switch games from Japan because they just play in English on a North American Switch. So this one is a bit of a gem in that aspect. And like I said, I really enjoy Wario Land, and Wario Land 3 is a really fun romp itself. To me, this was like peak Wario Land. Wario Land 4 is a lot of fun as well, but this was my first Wario Land game. It's full of really interesting mechanics if you haven't played it before. Mr. Driller, kind of in a similar vein to Bomberman. This is an arcade game that is essentially the same story every iteration. You are drilling down and you gotta collect pills for energy and break blocks. The intro is in Japanese, but unlike Bomberman Max, you can skip it and it seems a lot more inconsequential. And once you do, you have the choices. First choose obvious 500 and 1000, and anything else that you're curious about, you can, again, wave Google Lens over it and you're all set. But that's the only place where it really matters. Otherwise, it's Mr. Driller, and I love this little guy. So this video was actually brought to you by one of my nerd fuse, in that they suggested it a couple of times, and I was hesitant to make it because I don't want to accidentally rock the used market in a negative fashion for buyers and collectors. But also I had to acknowledge that I am not Logan Paul, so probably like this is gonna get like 1K views, and those of you who are watching it and are collectors and want to play physical cartridges are gonna just have something neat to look out for now. So I hope some of this information was new and something that you can go on the hunt for now, or if it's not new, perhaps you have some additions to this list. If so, please let me know. I would love to find them and give them a go myself, especially any games that are Japan only, but you can still play without knowledge of Japanese. That would be really neat, because those are some that I'm always down to try. As a sort of general rule, any game that's more arcade-like is going to be fine in Japanese. As a rule, RPGs are essentially moot.
Wait, hold on, quick interruption. Do you like surfaces? Any sort of surface. Your dresser, your water bottle, your laptop. If so, Cool Uncle has stickers now. And you can decorate your favorite surfaces with a reminder that Cool Uncle loves you, even though fish maybe are a bit reluctant about you. I learned pixel art just to make this fish. It was a vision. But wait, do you hate surfaces? No problem. If you hate surfaces, you can use Cool Uncle stickers to cover them up so you don't have to look at those ugly surfaces anymore. So head on over to my Ko-fi shop and grab some stickers for your surfaces. Whether you love them or hate them, they're a great solution for all types of surface-to-person relationships. All right, back to your regularly scheduled Uncle programming. Bye!
If this video was interesting at all and you'd like a follow-up, I will also do one on Game Boy Advance and 3DS games that you can play Japanese copies of without knowing Japanese. So make sure to subscribe so that that video will pop up in your notifications. As always, I have been your Cool Uncle Marissa, and don't forget, Cool Uncle loves you. Bye-bye.